They say the forest speaks, but only to those who listen in the silence between heartbeats. At the edge of the village of Marrow's Hollow, where the trees thicken into a wall of shadows, there lies a place no one dares tread after dusk. Mothers hush their children when they speak of it. The old men with broken backs and faraway eyes claim they've heard the trees whisper their names. And when the wind blows just right, curling through the twisted limbs like breath through a flute, it carries voices, long, low, and ancient. No one knows exactly what dwells within, but all agree on one thing. The forest is alive and it remembers. There are stories, of course. Tales passed down from trembling lips over candlelight. Of hunters who entered in search of game and returned empty-eyed, speaking only in riddles. Of a child once lost in the underbrush, returned 3 days later with a crown of thorns and no memory of her name. Some even whisper of a creature with eyes like stars and fur that flickers like dying flame, always watching, always waiting. Long ago it was said the forest was a sacred place, where the line between the mortal world and something other grew thin. There were guardians once, they say, chosen by fate and bloodline, sworn to keep balance between man and magic. But the guardians faded, and the forest grew restless. Without its protector it began to twist. Now it slumbers, deep and dark, cradling forgotten power beneath its moss-covered floor. The villagers built fences of iron and salt. They left offerings on the border, honey, bread, coins, anything to keep the shadows at bay. But nothing lasts forever. And the forest, patient and eternal, waits. Tonight it stirs. A breeze slips through Marrow's Hollow, colder than it should be for spring. The trees sway though there is no storm. Far beyond the last cobbled path, under a canopy so thick it swallows the stars, something opens its eyes. It has waited a long time. Through generations of silence, of absence, of fading memory, it has waited. And now something is coming. Not just anyone. Someone it remembers. A thread pulled tight is about to snap. And the forest, that ancient, breathing place, begins to hum with the sound of destiny stirring once more. Ayra was born on a winter morning so quiet and still, the midwife claimed even the snowflakes had paused in the air to hear her first breath. Her father, a woodsman with warm eyes and a voice like crackling firewood, named her after an old word that meant light of the forest. Her mother died soon after, and so Ayra's earliest memories were of her father's rough hands braiding her hair, of lullabies sung in a language no one else in the village spoke, and of stories told by hearthlight about trees that whispered, animals that spoke, and a forest that was once alive with wonder. But the warmth didn't last. When Ayra was 9, her father disappeared into the woods and never returned. They found his axe at the forest's edge, stained with something darker than blood, but no trace of him. The villagers said wolves. Or madness. Or perhaps the forest had finally taken what it was owed. Ayra didn't believe them. She waited by the gate each day for weeks, clutching his old leather cloak, certain he'd come back. He never did. And then came her stepmother. Lauria was a woman with polished nails, sharp cheekbones, and a voice as smooth as oil but twice as suffocating. She arrived from the city wearing a violet dress and a veil of sorrow, claiming to be Ayra's guardian by marriage in law. The village priest confirmed it. The papers were in order. And just like that, the warm house that smelled of pine and stew became a cold, silent prison. At first Lauria smiled. But the smile never reached her eyes. It started with little things. Ayra's bedroom was moved to the attic, then reduced to a pallet of straw beside the hearth. Her books, her father's journals, the old forest tales, were burned, to keep her mind clear of nonsense. She was told to stop crying, to stop dreaming, to stop asking questions. When Ayra did not, the punishments grew. She scrubbed floors until her fingers bled, fetched water before dawn in the freezing dark, and ate only scraps left behind on Lauria's plate. Every time she dared speak, Lauria reminded her she was nothing, a burden carved from dirt and pity. The villagers pitied her at first, whispering behind cupped hands. But time dulled their sympathy and they turned their eyes away. No one crossed Lauria. Her charm was too perfect, her gaze too calculating. Despite it all, Ayra never lost her gentleness. She found magic in the smallest things. The way morning light hit the frost on the windows, the hush of snowfall, the tiny bird that perched near the kitchen sill each day as if checking on her. She hummed the old songs her father had taught her, barely above a whisper when Lauria wasn't around. She spoke to the trees when she swept the garden, and sometimes she swore they listened. But the days were long and cruel. Lauria mocked her with each passing year, sneering at her tangled hair and ash-covered cheeks. "You'll never be more than a servant girl," she would say, pushing a broom into Ayra's arms. "You belong in the dirt, with the rats and roots. And still Ayra endured. At 16 she was tall and willowy, her skin pale from long days indoors, her hair always smelling of smoke and wood ash. Her hands were rough, her back bent from labor, but her eyes, soft, strange eyes the color of green tea leaves, held something unbreakable. A quiet strength. A quiet sadness. She had no friends. Only the stars through the chimney hole, the wind that rattled the shutters, and the dreams that would not die. Dreams of a forest that waited. A place her father once spoke of, a place where roots remembered and the trees knew your name. She'd nearly forgotten how his voice sounded, but not the feeling it left behind, like a fire in her chest on the coldest nights. One evening, as she knelt in the dirt planting onions for Lauria's supper, a crow landed beside her. Black as soot, eyes gleaming. It tilted its head, stared at her, then dropped a small object at her feet, a ring. Simple, silver, carved with the shape of a tree whose branches curled into a spiral. Her breath caught. It was her father's. Before she could speak, Lauria's voice rang out from the doorway, sharp as a whip. Get inside. And bring the water. Or no supper tonight. Ayra slipped the ring into her apron pocket. Her fingers trembled. The crow took flight. That night, lying on her straw mat, she clutched the ring and stared into the darkness. Something in her shifted, like a door creaking open inside her chest. She didn't know it yet, but the forest had stirred. It had seen her suffering. It had watched. And now, as the moonlight pooled across the floor in silver streams, it remembered her. Lauria had always known there was something different about the girl. From the moment she first stepped into that shabby cottage and laid eyes on Ayra, wild-haired, soot-streaked, yet radiant in a way no grime could conceal, she felt it. The girl's presence was like sunlight through cracked shutters, refusing to be shut out. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was unsettling enough. It was the stillness in her, the way the air seemed to bend ever so slightly around her, as if the world itself were listening when she moved. At first Lauria dismissed it. A phase. A child's luck. But as years passed and Ayra's beauty bloomed like a late rose in frost, Lauria's unease hardened into loathing. Every time the girl walked through the village for errands, heads turned. Men paused their work. Even the priest stammered through his sermons when Ayra sat in the pews. But it wasn't vanity that stirred Lauria's hatred. It was fear. A bone-deep terror she couldn't name. She saw it in Ayra's eyes, those strange greenish orbs that seemed to remember more than her years should allow. And then came the dreams. Lauria had always believed herself immune to superstition, but the visions clawed into her sleep like cold fingers. She saw the forest, vast, dark, breathing. She saw Ayra standing in its heart, glowing like moonlight, crowned with ivy and flame. The girl was speaking in a voice not her own, and behind her, the trees bent low in reverence. Lauria woke each time with sweat slicking her spine and the echo of that voice ringing in her ears. Something in her gut whispered that Ayra was not meant for this world alone. So she went to the mirror. Not just any mirror, but a relic from her youth, a shard of obsidian once stolen from a traveling merchant who spoke of bloodline magic and the power to see through skin into soul. She lit candles, muttered old words, and held the mirror up. It clouded, then cleared. What she saw turned her stomach. Not a girl. A key. A vessel. And the forest, the ancient one, the forbidden one, it was calling to her. Ayra was meant for it. Or perhaps it was meant for her. That night, Lauria made her decision. The next morning dawned gray and damp, clouds hanging low like a warning. Lauria called Ayra to the kitchen with a voice dipped in honey. The girl entered cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron, her hair tied back in a messy braid. I need you to run an errand, Lauria said, pouring tea that neither of them would drink. There's an herb I need from the forest, elder root. It grows at the base of the old pines, near the eastern glade. Ayra stiffened. No one went into the eastern glade. Not even the bravest hunters. It was too close to the deep woods, where paths twisted like snakes and time moved like water. I thought, we weren't supposed to go there, Ayra said carefully, her voice barely louder than the fire's crackle. Nonsense, Lauria said, forcing a smile. It's perfectly safe if you stay on the path. And I trust you. You're not like the fools in this village, afraid of shadows. Ayra hesitated. I don't know what elderroot looks like. You'll recognize it when you see it. It smells sweet and the roots twist like braids. Bring back as much as you can carry. She handed Ayra a small satchel with a crust of bread, a skin of water, and a worn knife that couldn't cut through butter. Then she wrapped a shawl around the girl's shoulders with a gentleness that felt wrong, too practiced, like a snake brushing against skin before the bite. Be quick, Lauria said. Before the rain comes. Ayra stepped outside, the sky weeping a fine mist. The air was thick and the trees in the distance looked taller than usual, looming like watching figures. She glanced back once. Lauria was already shutting the door. Alone Ayra walked. Lauria watched from the window until the girl was out of sight. Then she turned to the mirror once more. It was already showing the forest, already shifting. A ripple moved across the surface like breath on glass. "She is yours now," Lauria whispered. "Take her." But the mirror didn't answer. Instead it darkened completely. For a moment nothing moved. Then the candles blew out on their own, one by one. The room filled with cold. And Lauria, for the first time in years, felt the edge of something she had long believed buried. Dread. She hadn't sent the girl to her death. She had sent her to her awakening. The forest greeted her like a breath held too long, exhaled in silence. Ayra paused at the edge of the treeline, where the path from the village gave way to something older, something untouched. The grass underfoot was damp with mist, and the trees loomed so high their tops vanished into fog. The air smelled of earth, moss, and something sweet, like rotting fruit laced with honey. It was neither day nor night beneath the canopy. The light that filtered through was pale, greenish, and alive. It shifted, dimmed, and pulsed as if the forest had its own heartbeat. With a tremble in her chest, Ayra stepped forward. The path crunched beneath her worn shoes, soft moss over forgotten stones. A crow cawed once in the distance, but its cry was swallowed almost immediately by the thick, humming quiet. The satchel at her side felt heavier with each step, though it held almost nothing. Just bread, water, and the knife, dull and useless. Her fingers found the ring in her pocket, her father's ring, and she closed her hand around it like a talisman. It gave her courage. Barely. She walked. The forest did not stay still. After only a few minutes, Ayra turned and saw no trace of the path behind her. Where she had come from was now a thicket of thorns. Ahead, the trail split into two, then three, then vanished altogether, swallowed by vines and tall grasses. Her breath caught. She turned in a slow circle. Everything looked the same and different at once. Trees thick as walls, trunks knotted with faces. Faces? No, just bark. Just shadow. Just her imagination. She thought of the stories. The forest that remembers, her father used to whisper as he tucked her into bed. It knows your name even if you forget it. It remembers the first step you ever took and the last lie you ever told. Be kind to it. Be humble. And it will be kind in return. At the time she thought it just a tale. But now, walking beneath branches tangled like clasped hands, the truth in his voice echoed stronger than ever. This was not just a place. It was a presence. The trees whispered. Not loud. Not words. But she heard them. A rustling that followed her, always just behind. When she paused, they paused. When she breathed, they answered. And then the forest began to show its strangeness. Flowers bloomed in impossible colors. Blue as moonlight, gold like fireflies, red as the inside of a wound. Some of them floated midair, their stems fading into mist. One flower turned toward her as she passed, petals folding and unfolding like a blinking eye. A fox with two tails darted across her path, stopped, stared at her with human-like curiosity, then vanished into the underbrush. The trees grew denser the farther she walked, their trunks twisting in spirals, branches stretching downward like arms. She passed beneath an arch made from roots, and the moment she stepped through, the air changed. Thicker, heavier, warmer. The forest was welcoming her. Or testing her. The world she had known, gray stone walls, ash-filled hearths, her stepmother's sharp tongue, was miles behind her now. Your time bent. The sun barely touched the ground. Her sense of direction unraveled like a torn thread. But oddly, she did not feel entirely afraid. There was something familiar in the hush. She walked until her legs ached, her lips dry and her satchel light. The bread was gone. The water warm and stale. Still she moved forward. The ground beneath her seemed to pulse with memory, and the trees began to speak more clearly. She heard her name. Ayra. A soft murmur as though spoken by the wind through reeds. Her heart pounded. She spun around. Nothing but leaves. But the voice came again. Ayra. She gripped her father's ring tighter. The voice was not cruel. Not mocking. It was sad. Calling her not as a stranger but as a daughter. She thought again of his songs. Of how he had spoken of the forest like an old friend. A sacred thing. Where the stones remember your footsteps, he would whisper, and the stars whisper your story to the trees. And then she saw them. Tiny lights hovered in the air ahead. Not fireflies. These were colder, bluer, flickering with intelligence. They drifted toward her, circled once, then floated down the path. She hesitated. But her feet moved on their own. The lights guided her. Each step forward made the forest grow quieter, but not in fear. In reverence. She passed a pool of water so still it reflected not the trees but stars. She walked under vines that gently parted for her. Once she heard a deep rumble from beneath the earth, like a great beast sighing in its sleep. And still she walked. The forest was changing her. Not her body. Not yet. But something inside. Something deep. The part of her that had endured loneliness, cruelty, silence, it was awakening. Listening. Remembering. By the time the lights vanished, she stood at the edge of a clearing bathed in silver-blue light. In the center, a tree unlike any she had ever seen, wide and old, with bark like marble and leaves that shimmered with color. Its roots pulsed softly with light. The tree was waiting for her. And she, for the first time in her life, felt like she had arrived exactly where she was always meant to be. The air was thick with magic. A cool breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the scent of pine and something older, something ancient and familiar. The clearing where Ayra stood seemed to pulse with life, as though the trees themselves were watching her. She was no longer sure if the forest was leading her or if it was waiting for her to take the next step. The tree before her shimmered with soft, ethereal light. Its bark gleamed like polished stone, and its roots twisted into the ground, forming a natural throne of sorts, a seat made of the very earth that seemed to hum with power. But as Ayra stepped closer, her eyes caught a movement, a flicker at the edge of the clearing. A shadow. A wolf. At first it was just a glimpse, dark fur shifting beneath the trees, eyes like silver flames flickering in the shadows. Ayra froze, her pulse quickening. She had heard tales of the creatures in these woods, spirits and guardians, shapeshifters who roamed between worlds, but she had never imagined one might be so close. And so, real. The creature stepped into the clearing, its body sleek and black as midnight. It was large, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with broad shoulders and paws as wide as her own. Its fur seemed to absorb the light, darker than the shadows themselves. But what froze her heart were the eyes. Eyes that glowed with starlight. They shimmered with an unnatural brightness, like they held the vastness of the night sky within them. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wolf tilted its head slightly, its gaze never leaving hers. Then, in a voice like a wind sweeping through old ruins, it spoke. "We've been waiting for you." Ayra's breath caught in her throat. She took a step back, her heart hammering in her chest. A talking wolf. No, not just a wolf. This was something more. It was like a presence, a being woven into the very fabric of the forest. The words had come with an authority, as though they had been spoken by the forest itself. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling, despite her attempt to sound calm. "What do you want?" The wolf took a slow step forward, its eyes never leaving hers. It moved with a grace that was both predatory and regal, as though it ruled not just the forest but the very shadows themselves. As it came closer, Ayra could feel the air around her grow colder, heavier. The forest seemed to hold its breath. "I am the guardian of shadows," the wolf said, its voice low and resonant, like the deep rumble of thunder in the distance. "I watch over this realm. The forgotten things. The lost and the broken." Ayra's gaze faltered. She had heard whispers of such beings, guardians of the ancient places, protectors of magic long lost to the world of men. But she had never thought she would meet one. And certainly not like this. What do you mean you've been waiting for me?" she asked, her voice quivering as she spoke the question that gnawed at her. The air around them grew thicker, as if the forest itself was listening, waiting for the wolf's reply. The wolf's eyes seemed to deepen, as if it were looking through her, beyond her, into the very depths of her soul. It didn't move, didn't grow closer, but Ayra could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on her. She was suddenly aware of the strange tension in the air, the way the forest seemed to hum with unspoken power. "You are the one who will remember," the wolf said, its voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "The one who will awaken the things the world has forgotten. The forest has been waiting for a soul like yours, one who carries the blood of the old ways, the ones who understood the forest, who spoke its language." Ayra blinked, confused. "I don't understand. I'm just Ayra. A girl with a father who's gone. What do you mean, I have the blood of the old ways?" The wolf's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. It lowered its head slightly, as if acknowledging the confusion in her voice, before it spoke again. "Not just any blood," the wolf said, its voice a little quieter now. "The blood of the forest itself. Of those who were meant to guard it, to protect the balance. Your father, he was one of us in a way." But you, it paused, a slow, deliberate motion. You are the key. The forest has chosen you. Ayra's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing. Her father? One of them? She thought back to the stories he used to tell, the songs about the trees, the spirits, and the magic that ran deep in the land. Could it be true? Was she really the one the forest had been waiting for? The one to awaken what had long been forgotten? I don't know what you mean, Ayra said, shaking her head. I'm just a girl. I don't have any magic. I don't know anything about guarding forests. The wolf's eyes flickered with something like amusement. It stepped closer now until it was just a few feet from her, its dark form towering over her. Its breath came out in slow, steady puffs, like the whisper of wind through the trees. You will learn, it said, its voice a little softer now, as though it was speaking not just to her, but to something deep inside her. In time you will learn what you are meant to do. Before Ayra could respond, the wolf took another step back as if satisfied with its words. It turned its head slightly, eyes still glowing with starlight. Come, the wolf said, its voice almost a command. The forest has much to show you. And much to teach. It turned, its sleek body disappearing into the shadows of the trees, its glowing eyes the last thing Ayra saw before it was gone. She stood there for a long moment, the echo of its words ringing in her ears, the air still heavy with its presence. The forest had not yet released its hold on her. It had only just begun. Ayra stood frozen in the clearing, her mind swirling with the wolf's cryptic words. The forest around her hummed with an unsettling energy, and yet, as she breathed in the cool, damp air, there was an undeniable sense of belonging. The trees, the moss, even the whispered voices that seemed to echo through the wind, all of it felt like it was calling her, waiting for her to understand. As the wolf disappeared into the shadows, Ayra hesitated. She had so many questions and no clear answers. What was the heart of the forest? What was her father's connection to this strange realm? And most of all, why was she here? The silence grew heavier, thick with magic, as if the forest itself was waiting for her to take the next step. She glanced toward the tree, the one with the shimmering bark and glowing roots, still standing tall in the center of the clearing. It felt like a beacon, something older than time itself, something pulsing with power. As she walked toward it, the ground beneath her feet softened, and a strange pull in her chest grew stronger. Her father's lullabies played in her mind again, the songs he used to sing before bedtime, his voice soft and warm as he spoke of places far beyond the village, of forgotten gods and sacred groves where the old magic still lingered. She remembered the stories of creatures who guarded the boundaries between worlds, of gods who slumbered beneath the earth, waiting for someone to wake them. Ayra reached the base of the tree and placed her hand against the bark, its surface warm and alive, like it was breathing with her. And then, without warning, the air around her seemed to shift. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the clearing, reverberating from the very ground beneath her. You seek answers, the voice said, unmistakably the wolf's. The forest has long awaited you, child of the old blood. But you must know this, the forest is not just trees and stones. It is alive. Ayra stood still, her hand still pressed against the tree, her heart racing. The ground trembled slightly as though something within the forest was awakening. She was no longer sure if she was hearing the wolf's voice or the forest itself speaking through him. The heart of the forest is what keeps this world together, the wolf continued. It is the pulse of this realm, the source of its power, its magic. It is what sustains the land, protects it from the corruption of the outside world. And your father was its protector. Ayra's chest tightened at the mention of her father. She had always known he was different, though she hadn't understood why. The villagers had whispered about him, called him a man with strange ways. But in her youth she had never questioned it. She had only known him as the father who loved her, who soothed her fears with lullabies about ancient things. He was a guardian, the wolf said, its voice softening as it stepped from the shadows once more, its starlit eyes gleaming in the fading light. And you, Ayra, are his heir. You have inherited his blood, his magic. You are meant to awaken the heart, to protect this realm when the time comes. Ayra's mind swam with the weight of this revelation. Her father had been more than just a man who worked the land. He had been tied to something far older, far more powerful. He had been a part of the very fabric of the forest itself. The heart of the forest, Ayra whispered, her voice barely audible. What happened to him? Why didn't he tell me? The wolf's eyes softened, and it took a few steps toward her, its massive frame moving with quiet grace. It regarded her with an intensity that made her shiver. He could not, the wolf said. He kept his duty secret from you to protect you. The heart is a dangerous thing, Ayra. Not everyone who seeks it can wield its power. Not all who awaken it survive. Ayra swallowed hard, her throat dry. She couldn't imagine what it would have been like for her father, bearing the weight of such a secret. He had never shown any fear, never mentioned the burden he carried, only shared stories of the beauty and the danger of the forest. But now, standing on the edge of this unknown world, the truth felt much darker than she had ever anticipated. "But, if I am to awaken the heart," she began, her voice trembling, "what does that mean? What do I have to do?" The wolf gazed at her, its starlit eyes seeming to pierce into her very soul. "You will have to enter the heart's chamber," it said slowly, each word heavy with gravity. "It is not a place that can be reached by mere mortals. It lies deep within the forest, hidden beneath roots older than time. Few have ever seen it, fewer still have returned. But you, Ayra, are different. The forest has chosen you." Ayra's mind reeled with the weight of these words. She was to enter the very heart of this realm, the source of its magic, the essence of its power, and awaken it. The very thought terrified her. What would happen to her once she touched it? Would she be changed? Or would she lose herself entirely to whatever ancient forces lay within? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to center herself. Her father's stories echoed in her mind. The heart is not just a thing, it is a force. It is alive. Remembers, but it can forget you too. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. The forest around her was no longer just a forest, it was a living, breathing entity. The trees, the soil, the air, everything seemed connected, interwoven by threads of magic. The heart was not just a power, it was the pulse of the world itself. "The heart of the forest," she whispered. "How do I find it?" The wolf stepped back, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You will find it when you are ready. The forest will guide you, but remember this. There is darkness here as well, Ayra. The heart is a gift and a curse. It can protect, but it can also destroy." The words hung heavy in the air, and Ayra knew that she had no choice. She had to find the heart and she had to awaken it. For the sake of the forest, for the memory of her father, and for herself. Ayra stood at the edge of the clearing, her breath shallow and fast as the wolf's words echoed in her mind. The heart of the forest was close now. She could feel it. But to reach it, she had to prove herself worthy. The forest would not allow anyone to approach the heart without first passing its trials. Trials that tested the very essence of who she was. "Are you ready?" the wolf asked, its voice low and steady, though there was a hint of something, anticipation? Expectation? In its tone. Ayra nodded, though her heart raced. She had no choice but to move forward. Whatever awaited her in the depths of the forest, she knew she had to face it head-on. She couldn't turn back now. The wolf's eyes gleamed in the twilight, and it gave a small, approving nod. "Then go. The trials begin." Without another word, the wolf turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Ayra alone at the edge of the forest. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, the path ahead stretching out before her like a winding river. But the air was thick with magic, and the trees around her felt alive, watching, waiting. The first trial came quickly. As Ayra walked deeper into the forest, the path before her began to shift and change. The once familiar trees twisted into unfamiliar shapes, their trunks growing taller and darker, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The ground beneath her feet began to rise and fall, the earth shifting like a living thing. Suddenly the air around her crackled and a voice, sharp, ancient, spoke from all directions. "Answer this riddle, child. Fail and you will lose your way forever." Ayra froze, her heart skipping a beat. The voice wasn't one she could see, but it was everywhere, surrounding her like a dense fog. "I am not alive but I grow. I do not have lungs but I need air. I do not have a mouth but water kills me. What am I?" The words lingered in the air, hanging like a trap. Ayra's mind raced, her pulse quickening. She had always loved riddles as a child, solving them with her father by the fire. But now, her thoughts felt cloudy, and the forest seemed to close in on her, pressing her from all sides. The pressure of the task weighed on her. She breathed deeply, her mind scrambling for an answer. And then, like a flicker of memory, the solution came to her. "Fire," she said, her voice strong despite the uncertainty in her chest. "The answer is fire." There was a long silence. The air stilled and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sudden rush of wind, the trees shifted back, the path before her straightened once more. The voice, now softer, spoke again. "Correct. You may proceed." Ayra exhaled, her body trembling slightly. She had passed the first trial, but she knew there would be more. The forest was testing her not just with riddles, but with her heart, her very spirit. And this was only the beginning. As she continued deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler, the sky darkening as she entered a part of the woods that seemed untouched by light. The trees were older here, their bark cracked and gnarled, their branches twisted in unnatural shapes. The ground beneath her feet was soft and damp, and the smell of damp earth filled her nostrils. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a soft, mournful cry. Ayra, the voice was faint but distinct. It came from the shadows, distant yet close. Help me. Ayra stopped dead in her tracks, her heart thumping in her chest. Her name, someone, something, was calling to her. The voice was familiar, yet not. It felt like a memory, a shadow of something she couldn't quite grasp. She took a cautious step forward, the cry growing louder, more desperate. Ayra, please help me. She followed the voice, stepping deeper into the darkness of the forest. The path narrowed, and the trees grew thicker, their branches intertwining above her, blocking out the last remnants of sunlight. The air grew heavier, thick with a dampness that clung to her skin. The cry was no longer distant, it was right beside her, echoing from all sides. Ayra, the voice came again, but this time it wasn't a cry. It was a whisper. Why did you leave me? Her heart froze. The voice, this time, was unmistakable. It was her father's voice. Ayra, why didn't you save me? The words tore through her, and the ground beneath her seemed to shift. Her breath caught in her throat as the world around her blurred. Her father, her kind, loving father, was gone. But here, in the forest, in the darkness, his voice felt so real, so present. Tears welled up in her eyes. Father, she whispered, her voice shaking. The whisper came again, softer this time. You must forgive me, Ayra. You must let me go. A tear slipped down her cheek as she closed her eyes, a deep pain stirring within her. The grief of losing him, of never having the chance to say goodbye, flooded her heart. She had carried that sorrow with her all this time, buried it deep within her, but it was here, alive, alive in the very air around her. The forest knew her pain. The forest was feeding on it. But then, with a deep breath, Ayra opened her eyes, wiping the tear from her cheek. She knew she couldn't stay trapped in this illusion. It was a test, an emotional trial. The forest was not showing her the truth. It was showing her her fears. You are not my father, she said, her voice steady, though it trembled with emotion. I will not be trapped in my grief. And with those words, the darkness around her lifted. The trees straightened, the shadows faded, and the voice, her father's voice, faded into nothing. She stood alone in the clearing again, her chest heaving with the weight of the experience. She had faced her grief, her fear of losing her father, and in doing so, she had overcome the trial. The forest had shown her the depths of her own sorrow, but it could not control her. Ayra took another step forward, her resolve strengthening with each breath. She could feel the change in herself. Something was awakening within her, something that had lain dormant for years. The magic in her blood, her father's legacy, was beginning to stir. The forest was still watching. The trials weren't over. But Ayra was no longer the frightened girl who had entered the woods. She was stronger now, more sure of who she was and what she was meant to do. The heart of the forest was waiting, and she was ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. Ayra's journey through the forest had already begun to unravel the deepest secrets of her own soul, but now the forest had something darker to reveal, a truth she never could have anticipated. As the shadows deepened and the air grew colder, a new vision began to form before her eyes. It started subtly, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision, like a shadow shifting in the corners of the forest. The trees around her began to hum, a low vibrating sound that resonated deep within her chest, and the air thickened with a strange electric charge. She stopped in her tracks, heart pounding as the forest seemed to breathe around her, drawing her into its depths. Then it came, a wave of images, sudden and overwhelming, crashing into her consciousness. She saw her stepmother, not as the cruel woman who had tormented her for years, but in a different light. In the vision, the stepmother was standing in a dark, flickering room, surrounded by flickering candlelight and shadow. She was speaking with figures cloaked in black robes, their faces hidden in the darkness, their voices low and insidious. Ayra's breath caught as she saw the exchange. The stepmother's lips moved with urgency, and she could hear her words clearly, cutting through the vision like a dagger. I will do whatever it takes, the stepmother's voice hissed, filled with desperation. She must die. Ayra must never learn of her power, of her true heritage. The forest cannot fall into the hands of such a child. The vision shifted, the image becoming clearer. The stepmother, young and desperate, knelt before a shadowy figure, a being with eyes like burning coals, its form writhing with dark energy. A pact. The realization hit Ayra like a thunderclap. Her stepmother had made a pact, an unholy deal with dark forces in exchange for power, for control over Ayra's fate. The figure, an embodiment of shadow, extended a hand, offering a twisted, glowing sigil, an ancient mark of dark magic. The figure's voice slithered through the vision, cold and detached. You will rid the forest of the girl. Destroy her before she can awaken her true nature. The power of the heart of the forest will be yours. The stepmother had accepted the deal, sealing Ayra's fate in a way she could never have imagined. The vision shifted once more, showing the aftermath of that moment, the day Ayra's father had died. The air grew heavier, the trees groaning as they echoed the pain of the past. In another flash, Ayra saw her father's face, worn and tired, his eyes filled with sorrow as he held her tightly, whispering words of comfort to her before sending her off to the forest. But in this vision she saw what had been hidden from her, the secret her father had carried. Her mother. Ayra's mother, the woman who had died long ago. Ayra had never known the full story of her mother's death. All she knew was the vague whispers of a tragic accident. But now the forest revealed the truth. Ayra's mother had died protecting the very heart of the forest. The vision showed a younger version of her mother, standing in the center of the forest, the heart pulsing with a radiant light at her feet. A dark figure loomed over her, its form twisted and grotesque, like a shadow of death itself. Her mother had fought, using every ounce of her magic to keep the heart safe, to prevent it from falling into the hands of those who would corrupt it. But she had lost. The vision showed her mother's final moments, her body crumpling as the dark force claimed her life, the heart flickering out of its radiant glow. Ayra's heart ached as she watched her mother's sacrifice, but the forest wasn't done. The last piece of the vision hit her like a thunderous roar. Her father had known. He had known what the stepmother had done, and he had known the danger Ayra faced. But he had loved her too much to let her be consumed by the darkness. He had spent his life trying to protect her from the forces that had been unleashed on their family, trying to shield her from the truth. And now Ayra understood. Her stepmother had feared her bloodline, feared her potential. Ayra was no ordinary girl. She was the child of a powerful protector, the daughter of the woman who had once guarded the heart of the forest. She was the heir to the forest's legacy, the one who could awaken the heart once more. The betrayal of her stepmother cut deeper than any wound. She had been the one to care for Ayra, to raise her, but it had all been a lie. She had never seen Ayra as a daughter. She had only seen her as a threat to the power she had sought through dark means. The vision faded, and Ayra was left standing in the clearing, her breath heavy, her heart in turmoil. The truth was out. The woman she had called mother for so many years had been the architect of her suffering. The woman who had abused her, cast her aside, and tried to destroy her, had made a deal with dark forces to ensure that Ayra would never come into her full power. The stakes had never been higher. Ayra was no longer just a girl lost in the woods, searching for answers. She was the heir to a legacy of magic, a force tied to the very fabric of the forest itself. The heart of the forest was calling to her, but now she knew that her stepmother would stop at nothing to keep her from reaching it. As the vision faded and the reality of the forest returned, Ayra's resolve hardened. She would awaken the heart not just for the forest but for the truth. Her stepmother's pact would not claim her, nor would it claim the heart. She would protect the legacy of her mother and father, no matter the cost. The forest had chosen her and she would not fail. Ayra stood at the threshold of the heart of the forest, the air thick with anticipation. The trees, once dark and oppressive, had parted, revealing a clearing unlike anything she had seen before. Before her, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, was a massive tree, a towering ancient being whose bark shimmered with iridescent veins of gold and silver. Its branches stretched high into the sky, reaching for the stars, while its roots seemed to sink deep into the earth, drawing power from the very core of the world itself. The air hummed with magic, alive with the pulse of something vast and ancient. The tree before her was not just a living thing, it was the heart of the forest, the source of all the magic that flowed through these woods. The heart had been dormant for so long, waiting for someone worthy to awaken it. And now Ayra had come. Her heart raced in her chest as she approached the tree, the ground beneath her feet soft and cool. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the forest itself was pressing against her, urging her forward. The whispers of the trees surrounded her once more, but this time, they were no longer filled with uncertainty or fear. They were filled with hope, urging her to step into her destiny. Ayra closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She could feel the magic in the air, thick and powerful. It called to her, urging her to connect with it, to let it flow through her and awaken the power that had lain dormant within her for so long. She had already felt the stirrings of that power, of her true heritage, during her trials, but now, in the presence of the heart, she could feel it more clearly than ever. It was a deep, unshakable force, like the roots of the ancient trees themselves, strong and unwavering. She raised her hands slowly, the energy of the forest flowing into her like a current. At first it was a small thing, a whisper of magic, but as her fingers brushed the air, it grew. The power thrummed beneath her skin, alive and vibrant. She could hear the trees around her sing, their voices weaving together in harmony. The magic of the forest responded to her touch, reaching out to her like a forgotten friend. The wolf's words echoed in her mind, "We've been waiting for you." She had always wondered what that truly meant, what it meant for her to be the one chosen to awaken the heart. But now, standing before it, she understood. It was not just her bloodline that had made her worthy. It was her heart, her spirit, her ability to believe in something greater than herself. As she placed her palms gently against the glowing bark of the tree, a surge of energy shot through her, and her whole body was filled with light. The air crackled and the forest seemed to hold its breath. She felt herself drawn into the magic of the heart, her soul intertwining with the ancient force that flowed through the tree. It was as if she had become one with the forest itself, her very being melding with the pulse of life that had sustained it for centuries. The tree trembled beneath her touch, its branches quivering as though awakening from a long, deep slumber. The roots beneath the earth stirred, their deep vibrations reaching up through her body, grounding her to the earth itself. The forest responded, the once muted colors of the leaves and flowers suddenly brightening, coming alive with vibrant hues. The air grew warmer, the oppressive darkness lifting as the heart of the forest began to hum with renewed energy. Ayra's body glowed with a soft, golden light, her connection to the heart strengthening with every passing moment. The power within her grew, her magic blooming like a flower opening to the sun. Her bloodline, her mother's sacrifice, her father's protection, had led her here. But now, in this moment, it was her spirit, her courage, and her determination that unlocked the magic within. The heart pulsed once more, and Ayra felt herself drawn deeper into the tree's ancient core. She was no longer just a girl in the forest, she was its protector, its heir. Her thoughts became a blur, no longer her own, as the ancient magic of the heart poured into her, unlocking memories of forgotten gods, of old spells and forgotten words. It was a flood of knowledge, a torrent of ancient power that surged through her veins. With a final surge, the light from within her burst forth, flooding the clearing in a brilliant explosion of golden light. The earth beneath her feet shuddered as the forest awakened. The trees stretched higher, their branches brushing against the sky as if reaching for the heavens. The wind swirled around her, lifting her hair and filling her with a sense of purpose that transcended anything she had ever known. The forest was alive not just in the physical sense but in a deeper, more profound way. It was connected to her as if she and the forest were one and the same. The magic she had unlocked spread out in waves, flowing through every root, every leaf, every crevice of the forest. The dark forces that had sought to corrupt the heart, the stepmother's pact, the ancient shadows, faded into nothingness, their power lost in the wake of Ayra's awakening. The forest had been silent for so long, but now, it was alive with the hum of life, its pulse syncing with hers. And as the light began to fade, Ayra stood alone in the center of the clearing, her hands still resting against the glowing bark of the tree. Her heart pounded, her chest heaving with the effort of the transformation, but she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The forest had awoken, and with it, her true power had been unleashed. She had done it. She had awakened the heart of the forest. The balance had been restored, and the magic that had been dormant for so long now flowed freely through the land. The forest was no longer just a place of mystery and danger. It was her home, her legacy, and her responsibility. As the last traces of the light faded, Ayra stepped back, her heart filled with newfound strength and clarity. She had become something more than she had ever imagined, a protector, a healer, a force of nature itself. And with this power she would guard the heart and the forest from any who sought to harm it. The trials had led her here, and now the forest was hers to protect. And she would not fail. The forest, having granted Ayra its deepest magic, now began to hum with a quiet energy, signaling that her journey was not yet complete. The heart had awakened, but her final test lay beyond the ancient woods, back in the world she had once known. The stepmother, her treacherous past, and the dark forces that had conspired against her had not been vanquished by the forest's magic alone. No, Ayra's destiny was to confront them, to bring justice, and to finally claim her place as the protector of the heart. As she stood at the edge of the forest, the trees parted like a curtain, granting her passage back to the world she had once fled. The path ahead seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, the very air crackling with the magic that now flowed through her veins. Ayra felt stronger than she ever had before, her body radiant with the power of the heart. Her once muted features now glowed with an ethereal light, her hair shimmering with the faint glint of starlight. Every step she took felt purposeful, filled with the weight of her newfound power. But as she moved toward the edge of the forest, a thought lingered in the back of her mind: her stepmother. She had been left behind in the village, surrounded by lies, hatred, and betrayal. Ayra had once feared her, had once been her victim. But now she was no longer the frightened girl she had been. She was a force of nature, chosen by the forest itself, the bearer of its ancient magic. And she would confront the woman who had tried to destroy her. With a steady breath, Ayra stepped out of the forest and into the village, the familiar sights of the humble homes and narrow streets suddenly feeling alien to her. The people she once knew went about their daily lives, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon them. Her stepmother's house stood at the edge of the village, a dark, imposing structure that loomed like a shadow over the rest of the homes. The air around it seemed cold, devoid of the warmth of life, as though the house itself had been built from the same dark magic that her stepmother had wielded. Ayra moved toward the house, her steps silent but resolute. The closer she got, the more she could feel the oppressive weight of her stepmother's power, lingering in the very air. She knew that the confrontation would not be easy, that her stepmother would not simply give in to justice. But Ayra had come for more than justice. She had come for closure, for the truth, and for the balance that had been stolen from her. As she stood before the door, she didn't knock. She didn't need to. The door creaked open on its own, as if the house itself recognized her presence. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old incense and dark magic. The stepmother was waiting for her, standing at the center of the room, her eyes narrow with suspicion but also a hint of recognition. She had known this day would come. She had known Ayra would return, and she had prepared for it, though not in the way Ayra had expected. Ayra, the stepmother's voice was cold, detached, as though they were meeting as strangers instead of as mother and daughter. I see the forest has chosen you after all. You think you've come for justice. But what justice can you truly seek? You are nothing but a child of magic, a relic of the past. Ayra stood tall, her newfound strength surging through her as she locked eyes with her stepmother. You're wrong. I'm not a relic. I'm the heir to something far greater than you could ever understand. And I've come to claim what is mine. The stepmother sneered, her eyes flickering with disdain. You think you can defeat me? Do you think your little tricks and forest magic can undo the years of power I've accumulated? You have no idea what you're dealing with. But Ayra was no longer afraid. The forest's magic coursed through her, a force of nature that she had embraced, not just as a protector, but as someone who had learned to wield the very power of life itself. Her mother's sacrifice, her father's protection, everything had led her here. And now she would confront the woman who had betrayed them both. The stepmother raised her hands, calling upon dark forces, shadowy tendrils of magic that writhed and twisted in the air. The room seemed to grow colder, the walls closing in with the weight of the magic she summoned. Ayra could feel the pull of the dark energy, but it no longer held any sway over her. She had been tested, transformed, and reborn in the forest's magic. With a swift motion, Ayra raised her hand. The forest's magic responded instantly, cascading over her like a wave of pure energy. The tendrils of darkness that the stepmother had conjured faltered and shriveled, their power weakening in the face of the light Ayra now wielded. The room trembled as the magic clashed, a battle of forces that had been centuries in the making. Ayra, stop! The stepmother cried, her voice laced with desperation as she realized the power she had relied on for so long was no match for the ancient magic of the heart. You don't understand. This was never personal. I did what I had to do to survive. You were a threat. You always have been. Survival? Ayra's voice was calm, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. You chose power over family. You chose fear over love. And now you'll face the consequences. With a final surge of energy, Ayra extended her hand, and the magic of the forest enveloped the room. The stepmother's dark magic cracked and shattered like glass, dissipating into nothingness. The cold, oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the warmth of the forest's light filled the room. The stepmother, her face pale and broken, collapsed to her knees, the power that had once sustained her now gone. Ayra stood over her, not with triumph but with quiet resolve. "This is your reckoning. Not just for the lies you told but for the lives you've destroyed. The balance has been restored. And you too will fade into the shadows." The stepmother, now powerless, looked up at her, her face twisted in a final expression of bitterness and regret. "You think you've won? You are nothing like your mother." "I am exactly like my mother," Ayra said softly, her voice steady and unwavering. "And I will protect this world as she did." With that, the stepmother faded from view, her form dissolving into the same shadows from which she had drawn her power. The room was silent, the magic having played its final role. Ayra took a deep breath, the weight of the confrontation lifting from her shoulders. Justice had been served. The forest had been avenged, and with it, the balance had been restored. Ayra's journey was far from over, but this chapter had come to a close. And as she stepped away from the house and into the village, she knew that her path was now clear. The heart of the forest was safe. The magic of the world had been restored. And Ayra, the heir of that magic, would guard it for as long as she lived. Ayra stood at the edge of the village, her heart still heavy with the weight of the choices she had made. The forest, her home now, called to her, its magic pulling her like a tide pulling a ship back to its true course. The village, the world she had once known, felt small now, almost foreign. She had come from these people, these lands, but she had transcended them in ways they would never understand. The heart of the forest had awakened within her, and with it, a sense of purpose so vast, so eternal, that it could never again be confined by the walls of a cottage or the boundaries of a village. Her mother had once protected the forest, her father had kept her safe, and now Ayra was the one who would guard the heart. She would stand as its protector, a bridge between the realm of humans and the realm of magic. And yet, the forest was not just her home, it was a part of her, intertwined with her very soul. The creatures, the ancient trees, the whispering wind, they had all been waiting for her. The forest had chosen her, and now she would take her place as its queen. As she stood on the outskirts of the village, Ayra felt the magic of the heart surging through her veins. The trees, though distant, seemed to call her name. The wind stirred gently, brushing against her skin like an ancient promise. The villagers went about their lives, unaware of the ancient forces that now shaped her existence. But they didn't need to understand. She didn't need their approval. Her place was with the forest, with the creatures and the magic that had chosen her as their guardian. And that was all she needed to know. She turned away from the village, taking her first steps back toward the forest, her path illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight. As she walked, the air around her seemed to shimmer with energy. It wasn't just the magic of the heart, it was the power of the forest itself, flowing through her, responding to her every movement. The trees whispered her name, the wind carried their words, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life. As Ayra reached the forest's edge, the familiar, protective embrace of the trees welcomed her. The leaves rustled in the wind, but now they no longer whispered of fear or darkness. They spoke of life, of renewal, and of an ancient magic reborn. Ayra had come to realize that her destiny was not just to protect the heart of the forest. She was to be its queen, its ruler, its heart. She would protect this realm, not with violence or fear, but with the wisdom and compassion that had always defined her. The forest welcomed her as its ruler, its queen. The ancient magic surged through her, and she could feel the creatures of the woods watching, waiting. The animals, the plants, the trees, all were attuned to her. They knew she was their guardian, their protector. The very essence of the forest seemed to shift, transforming under her touch. The dark shadows that had once lingered were now vanquished, replaced by the brilliance of life and light. The forest had been reborn, and so had she. As she walked deeper into the heart of the woods, Ayra felt the pulse of the forest grow stronger, resonating within her. It was a power beyond measure, beyond comprehension. The heart of the forest, the very source of its magic, throbbed with life, and Ayra stood as its conduit. She was not just the heir to the forest's power, she was its living embodiment. The magic flowed through her like blood in her veins, strong and pure. In the days that followed, the legends of the Forest Queen began to spread. Whispers in the villages and towns told of the mysterious girl who had vanished into the forest, never to be seen again. Some said she had become a spirit of the woods, a guardian who watched over the land. Others spoke of her as a goddess, her heart intertwined with the roots of the ancient trees, her eyes glowing with starlight. It was said that she could speak with the creatures of the forest, that she could command the winds and the earth. And some even claimed that she could see into the future, her gaze filled with the knowledge of ages past. The stories were told around campfires, passed down from one generation to the next. The villagers would speak of her with awe and reverence, but they also spoke with fear. For the Forest Queen was not a being to be trifled with. Her power was beyond mortal understanding. Her magic was wild and untamed, as old as the earth itself. And those who dared to enter the forest with ill intentions would never return. The creatures of the woods would see to that. The heart of the forest was not a power to be abused, and Ayra, its protector, would ensure that it was never misused again. As the seasons passed, Ayra became a living legend. The villagers no longer saw her as a girl who had once been their neighbor or their servant. She had transcended those roles, becoming something greater, something more. The villagers would leave offerings of flowers and fruits at the edge of the forest, hoping to gain her favor, hoping that she would protect them from the dangers that lurked in the shadows. And sometimes Ayra would appear at the forest's edge, her silhouette glowing with the light of the heart, offering them peace and protection in return for their respect. But she never returned to the village. She had found her place among the trees, among the creatures, among the magic. She was the queen of roots and stars, a living bridge between the world of men and the realm of the supernatural. The forest, once a place of fear and mystery, had become a sanctuary under her reign. And the heart of the forest beat strong, its magic flowing freely once more, protected by the very girl who had once been cast out, abandoned and betrayed. Ayra's name lived on in the stories of the people, and in the hearts of the creatures who called the forest home. She had become a symbol of strength, of rebirth, and of the deep connection between the world of humans and the magic of the earth. She was no longer just a girl with ash in her hair. She was the Forest Queen, immortal, eternal, and ever watchful, her power woven into the very fabric of the land. And so, the legend of Ayra, the Forest Queen, lived on, whispered on the wind, sung in the rustling of the leaves, and felt in the heartbeat of the earth. Her legacy was written in the stars, her story passed down through the generations, as the world continued to turn beneath her watchful gaze. In the hush of twilight, when the wind stirs through the branches and moonlight pools like silver milk on the forest floor, a song begins. It's not sung with lips, but with leaves, with roots, with the hush of stars blinking through ancient boughs. The forest sings her story still, of the girl with ash in her hair, who walked into darkness and became light. Children curl beneath woolen blankets and whisper of her, their wide eyes scanning the shadows for a glimpse of silver eyes or the faint glimmer of her crown made from starlight and vine. Some say she watches them when they are kind. Some say she visits them in dreams, leaving petals on their pillows. The village tells her tale like a lullaby, soft and haunting, wrapped in wonder and warning. They say the forest has a queen now, that it breathes her name in every gust, that it remembers. And deep within the emerald heart of that ancient wood, where no man dares tread too far, the wind pauses. The trees lean in. The moss listens. Because the forest remembers Ayra. And it waits, patient and eternal, for the next soul brave enough to be chosen.